It's 9:14 on the 27th of May, 2022 in Beijing. Good morning. Good evening, Jen. Okay, so yes. Wow, what a title, right? Old man stirs up Asia and eats babies. Okay.
Yep.
It's not clickbait. I promise it's not clickbait. So what we're going to be talking about is going to give you a general description of what we have to cover, what's happened. We've had a very busy week as always. There's a new Australian Prime Minister. Boris Johnson was caught raising a wine glass. But other things we're going to discuss in more depth. Japan's economy contracts as energy prices soar. Here's what to know about Joe Biden's first trip to Asia as US president. The Mexican president has threatened to skip the Americas summit unless the US invites every country. Okinawa, the Japanese island, marks 50 years of returned sovereignty back to Japan, while protests over the US base there are also happening. After Biden's Taiwan remarks, so Biden made some remarks about defending Taiwan militarily if China did something, if mainland did something. And then Blinken, his secretary, foreign secretary, Secretary of State, I should say, had to walk those comments back. We'll be talking about those. Then this is where our title comes from. Young CSF, which is brain fluid, has been proven to restore certain memory loss functions and brain functions in older mice. And we're going to be talking about what this means or potentially means for the harvesting of young people's brains. Then China, of course, is sweeping a deal with Pacific Island countries. And my neighbor has started drilling next door. Brilliant. We're also going to be talking about Texas shooting. 19 children were killed in a shooting in a school in Texas.
And 2 teachers.
And the teacher too, yeah. So we're going to be talking about that too. So we're going to go regional. We're going to start with Asia Pacific. And I hope that the drilling is not too bad.
Dear. Yeah,
perfect timing.
Yeah, it's not something we can help. Right, so Asia this week, at least from a surface kind of angle, really does seem like when, the old dementia-filled man who wears an adult diaper, aka Biden, visits Tokyo and Seoul, Japan and South Korea. That stirred up everything, though, to be fair. Some of the stuff was already pre-scheduled. It was supposed to happen around this time. Some stuff or more impromptu, if you will. So the plan first started with, it's actually from, I believe about last week, where the United States had this plan of basically creating another TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership with ASEAN countries, with only, get this, for the entire Asian continent minus China, Southeastern Asian continent, only $1.5 billion of investment.
Right.
Like, come on, that is pathetic, right?
Right.
So
1.5 billion?
Yeah, only 1.5 billion. So then right after that, you have Biden coming in, literally flying in to visit Japan and South Korea to secure this kind of Asian NATO kind of setup. So what this is a few things to make sense of all of this. 2 weeks prior, South Korea joined the digital command system of NATO. And we suspect that they launched a biological attack by releasing COVID samples into North Korea, but that cannot be confirmed.
Right, can't be confirmed, yeah.
Now, we have this, and so it's essentially reinforcing the Asian NATO, first of all. Well, for what? For the purpose of course, the potential hypothetical battle over Taiwan, right? Against China. And then Biden, in his glorious dementia, has declared, basically slip of tongue said the things that you're not supposed to say openly diplomatically. Because like when you are the president and when you say things diplomatically, your words have legal meanings. Whereas if you're just like strategizing in your own office with your people, then like that's not like you can say whatever you want basically behind closed doors. But as a guy who has the dementia, he cannot identify that difference. And so he said the most kind of anti-China narrative that goes on in the Oval Office and in the Pentagon openly in front of the press to China, essentially. And it led to immediate spike. Like the tension was already spiking, right? But it wasn't that serious because the United States is in decline and it's not capable of that serious kind of political economic upset. Again, it literally only has 1.5 billion spare money. That's like the amount of poverty, bankruptcy that we're talking about right now, which for a country that size is really bad. So then it went to what? It now wants to militarily upset this situation. And then the Secretary of State and the entire State Department and White House spokesperson immediately afterwards has to walk back Biden's comments. We will militarily defend Taiwan. So now let's talk about the pre-scheduled and impromptu parts of China's response. Understand that in East Asia, it is a unified bloc of China, DPRK, and Russia. That is a very solid alliance. So right after this, DPRK started launching ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan again. I believe it was 3 launches. China was already conducting scheduled annual military exercise in the region this year, but it just became more intense, essentially. And what was surprising was the long-range strategic bombers of both China and Russia conducted joint flight, nuclear-capable bunkers that are able to fly across continents for thousands of kilometers in a joint flight in international airspace around South Korea and Japan as a show of force. A massive fleet of strategic bombers that are capable of carrying all sorts of more advanced ballistic missiles and cruise missiles and whatnot. So why is any of this happening? Well, so we have to take a step back. Dialectical thinking requires us to think about context. What is the context? Well, the rising strength of the Chinese Navy and the declining strength of the U.S. Navy. The United States Navy is declining due to one very simple reason: inflation. I.e., whatever plan it had for building in order to maintain the size of a fleet, you need to have more coming in, or equal amount that's coming in, than the amount that's being retired, right? But the amount that's coming in requires money, and it's built over time, over decades, right? But what if inflation happens? Well, then if your previous budget is let's say 20 billion, then all of a sudden it's 30 billion now. Surprise. And so what do? You cut ships. So less ships are coming in and more ships are being retired. So your strength decrease, very simply. Simple as put. Whereas China's naval strength is still increasing. So the first Chinese, or the first really non-American super carrier in the world will enter trials. Will be in water next month, around my birthday, mid-June-ish, actually. So what is it? Well, it's a electromagnetic catapult aircraft carrier that has a large capacity for aircrafts that is capable of hosting naval jets that are superior to the F-35 because it doesn't want vertical takeoff capabilities. Thus, it has more weight and room to do anything else that it wants to. And it's bigger, so it just has more weight has space to be able to hold stuff, which makes it perform better. And the more time you give China, the more of these things are going to show up. And understand that China is building a whole suite of new generations of anti-submarine helicopters, carrier-borne air warning, air command aircraft. So it's not just like, oh, we have a new ship. It's like a whole new generation of combat systems.
Right.
So the more time you give China, the more China is going to be able to have that technological, at least in terms of quality, not sure about quantity, dominance over the U.S. fleet, whilst quantitatively the two is reaching an equilibrium of sorts. So if you don't like China now, or at least you want to make China make a blunder now,
right.
In the future, you don't get the chance to do that anymore, and this is why all of these things are happening on a fundamental level. And it has political consequences as well. I'm going to get into that later. But what are your thoughts, Richard?
Yeah, so I think you've done a good job there of mentioning the fact that the economy is always what the foundation of a navy, an expensive big navy, is built on. So you need lots of money to pay for very expensive aircraft and aircraft carriers, etc. So long-term, big picture, the U.S. Navy is declining because of inflation. And also, yes, comparatively, the Chinese economy will be bigger and probably arguably is bigger than the U.S. economy. So that's the one part. I agree with that entirely. In terms of aircraft carriers, of course, right now, as you said, there's this transition stage. So this point now is we're somewhere entering the stage of where, in terms of strategic sort of naval dominance, the Chinese are catching up. Obviously, the U.S. still has 10 or 12 super carriers, so they still have way more than anyone else. But then you have hypersonic missiles. So hypersonic missiles have been developed, anti-ship missiles. So
and now it's
that ability has been right. Also, we didn't mention this last week, but the U.S. has also now released. They have been testing and have some form of hypersonic weaponry. So they're catching up, but they are behind. So the Russians.
I'll look into that. I don't want to spend too much time on the technicality, but
I don't want to talk about it.
Experts have done a really good job.
I also want to mention. I want to finish on one point. One point.
Maybe we'll make it a Patreon episode or something.
Yes, we can make a Patreon episode about hypersonic missiles if we want. Yeah, the US one at least. Yeah, because we haven't had a chance to talk about that. But in terms of this moment, as you say, about catching the Chinese at a vulnerable moment. So you're neck and neck in competition here. The US doesn't want to give up its lead position, so it's going to try and make the Chinese stumble and undermine them in some ways. So this also comes down to this week. Biden went to Asia, but you also have a visit from the Chinese side to the Solomon Islands. So, and the New York Times, the Western media is very much hyping this as sort of like a regional dominance, like China's trying to dominate the region and expand and push out, which, it's quite interesting because these are very small nations. So we're talking about like Kiribati, tiny little nations who have always been in the sphere of the Commonwealth, usually like the Australian, British, or maybe the French in the case of some of them.
I saw some pieces on YouTube of the Solomon Islands chose whom? Like what's this URL?
Right. So they're also they're aware that the Chinese have the ability to, make bilateral relations with these nations. And it makes things very awkward for them because then, these nations are able to then vote against them in the UN General Assembly. In effect, actually, it builds their independence, I think, because it makes them have a choice. They aren't stuck living under the yoke of the Western side. They have to compete. So the West now has to try and make them want to choose them rather than force them to bend to the will of the IMF, the World Bank, and stuff. So But that's another element of the fact that China is on this visit. The foreign minister is going to all these islands.
Yeah, let's absolutely do transition to the political talk now. As it's a thing in I guess in China, because we have like a Marxist framework. We say that there are three subjects most important to this world: economy, politics, and military. That's they just come together. So I want to. We've just covered the military side, and now let's cover the political side, and then we'll move on to the economic side. So in terms of politics, like you said, the Solomon Islands, what people fail to understand is two things. One is that Solomon Islands literally was on the brink of collapse due to a CIA op, color revolution, to overthrow them because the Solomon Islands upholds one China policy in the United Nations votings. Like, come on, that's just you're gonna overthrow a whole country, a whole government, legally elected by its own people, just like that, over some votes in the United Nations. Like, are you kidding me? And so out of panic, they looked towards China to provide police training, police gears, anything from tasers, batons to pistols and rifles, and police gear, Chinese SWAT team, that kind of stuff. That's what they were looking for, because for such a small island, you don't expect them to be able to manufacture their own rifles. Like, that's not realistic, right? So then, this is then being painted as, China naval base, Chinese imperialism, whatever. And from a Chinese political side, though the socialist diplomatic philosophy set by the first administration of the Chinese government, Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, have dictated that China is to make no alliance and to make no military. To not be military expansionists ever, right? For communist reasons. If we were to abandon those principles for just one moment, if China wanted to make the Solomon Islands a missile launch pad, it absolutely could. The beyond any doubt, any sense of a doubt, it absolutely could have, but it doesn't, for principle reasons. So, and yet you have West here, basically fear-mongering its own people, right? China bad, etc., etc. So on the political side, this week was talking about also occupation and island indigenous people. This week was the 50th year anniversary of U.S. Japan and U.S. Occupation of Okinawa since World War II. The Okinawan kingdom, as it used to be called, is a separate kingdom that has very friendly ties to China. Never had any hostilities because, it has exotic goods for China, gets fat off of Chinese trade. China offers them, fancy cultural things, and there were never fully colonization of any sorts for thousands of years. And then Japan, Empire of Japan, their very first colony was actually Okinawa, right? And then it was Korea. And then now the U.S. is occupying them. So on this 50th anniversary, massive protests broke out by the Okinawan people against the United States. So there is a few layers of complications that is going on there that must be discussed. One is obviously the United States Marine Corps and Air Force and Navy, but in this case specifically Marine Corps, is polluting the Okinawan drinking water with essentially a hyped up version of Teflon. So Teflon is the shit that you use on non-stick pans.
Yeah.
And the chemical property of this thing is that it doesn't dissolve. It does not degrade. You cannot use any kind of biological thing to dissolve it. It is resistant to heat, to acid, and to base. It's resistant to everything.
It survives on frying pans, so yeah, it's pretty hard stuff.
Because it's made to be non-stick. Go figure.
Yeah.
This is kind of stuff is used for like coatings for aircrafts and stuff, and it is just dumped into the Okinawan sewage system, and is a carcinogen, and cannot be get rid of. It literally like cannot be filtered because Teflon, people. That's what that does. And so, of course, the people of Okinawa are rightfully outraged, but they have no right to legally have no power, jurisdiction over American military bases at all. So they're not even allowed to go in and investigate if the U.S. Marine Corps has even like packed up their shit properly. So that's the first layer of complications. But then the government of Japan is doing a second layer of complications, which is that it's basically coming in to say, like, yes, we will help you to get rid of the Americans, to kick out the American bases, but we will use your suffering of the Okinawan people. I'm hypothetically speaking as the government of Japan right now, to prove a point that we need to normalize as a nation and rejuvenate the national military and become a full-fledged country with a full sovereignty again. And we need to return to this, like we need to return to the good old days of Japanese imperialism and militarism in order to resist the Americans and the Chinese. We will be our own nation, the empire of the rising sun. Like that shit. This is their point, which like, so situation is complicated. They're trying to pull all these schemes.
Sure. I mean, on the Okinawa thing, I'll comment that, there's been many stories over the years. I mean, you've got the whole prostitution thing. You also have lots of sort of women being abused and whatnot by soldiers, Marines on the island. And I think there's also other pollution stories over many years, different types of pollution. I mean, there's also a higher level of radiation on that island. It's been linked to the base. But
according to
I think
a friend of ours in the U.S. Navy, when he was still working, deployed, he heard stories of like Navy and Air Force jets, right? So Okinawa is a really strategically important island with airports with shitloads of American combat aircrafts. So what do they do? Well, like when you have too much fuel when you land, the aircraft is too heavy, right? So in order to avoid that, commercial airlines do this too, just less frequently. You dump out the fuel that's in your plane, and so that the weight of the plane crushing its own landing gears is less when it impacts. It does not. It increases the longevity of all the machine parts of the landing gear, which is very complicated and delicate, right? There's just one problem. One, in this showdown, stare down with China that's been going on for like 2 decades, 3 decades even now, it requires the U.S. Air Force and Navy to scramble their jets extremely frequently. That's the first thing.
Okay.
Second problem is what the airstrips are built right next to elementary schools. So jet fuels are being dumped onto Okinawan elementary school kids overhead many times a day, every day, nonstop, every week, every month, every year.
No, this ties into it, right? This pollution and sort of complete disregard for the health of people in Okinawa. But so let's move on. I don't know if we want to cover more Asian stories. I think there's other stuff to add to it. Of course, there's also the election of a new prime minister in Australia, Anthony Albanese. He's a Labour candidate. I don't know much about him. I just saw that there's a video of him at an event relating to Syria back, I don't know, it was 2015, maybe 2016, I'm not sure. But he says, the issues and the concerns of the Syrians should be decided by Syrians. So if you read into that statement, I guess he might be someone who's not an interventionist. So perhaps this is a positive leader, but I don't know much about this candidate. I don't know much about this party. I mean, it's the Labour Party, so if it's based on anything like the British Labour Party, which I'm sure is the heritage of the party, or maybe some sort of social democratic similarity, then I don't think we can be too positive about what that means. Is he like Jeremy Corbyn? I don't know. So maybe we can discuss that next week. But I do know that this video came out, which at least implies that he's not an interventionist. So maybe this is good for China relations in the Indo-Pacific and stuff. We'll see.
So there are two more things three actually things to mention. So ASEAN countries and India, in their joint statement with the United States, explicitly stated that one, it is not to exclude China, like whatever trade zone that they're going to newly form, is one, not to exclude China, and two, to not explicitly be exclusive of any nation, any party. That's how they wanted to set it up, which is quite interesting. And we'll see a consistent theme here. Two is as we've spoken about this 2 to 3 weeks ago, actually, from the Chinese Ministry of State Security, they are expecting political and hybrid operations by the West, both Western China and Eastern China. So we've seen Eastern China, like that's literally everything we've been talking about. So on the Western China front, there is this BBC leak of apparently like CPC gave like a shoot to kill order against all Uyghurs in Xinjiang, apparently. Which, like, given the timing, and given what our own kind of indicators has reported, I do not buy that for a minute. I just don't. If there is, again, so like it's quite interesting, which because it brings on
I think on the Xinjiang thing, I haven't had the chance to look through it all of it yet. I want to take a look at it. I mean, I know that they've released 5,000 pictures of people. The Western depiction of this is that these were, the Gulag pictures. This is the detention center pictures. Other people have just said it just looks like a normal yearbook, just like pictures of people,
Right.
But I've also read or heard about this thing of the shoot to kill policy. So I think maybe we can discuss it next week. Maybe we can also make it.
We will actually need to discuss this next week, because the United Nations Human Rights chief is, as we speak, in China right now. Right. Is busy in China, and so like.
I think what I want to do
is see like some sort of publication.
I think we'll ask Carl Jha to come on and speak about it. He's a really good commentator, and he's really, really in tune with all this kind of stuff. So it'd be great to hear his thoughts on this. I'm sure he's already having to look through all of the documents. And I mean, I listened to the BBC depiction of this, and they interviewed a couple civil rights activists, let's call them that, or rights activists, Uyghur rights activists, who are based in Australia and Germany. And the BBC correspondent said, well, Xinjiang, most people in Xinjiang actually refer to it as East Turkestan. And to be honest, it was the most ridiculous thing ever. The idea that, I mean, for first, they don't even speak English, so I don't know why they would call it East Turkestan. But also, I highly doubt that like people, Uyghurs, do not use this term. It's like a political party. This is like a really bizarre, like fringe group that has that sort of terminology. But they also then brought out and wheeled out their famous Adrian Zenz was then referenced. We talked about him before. Yeah.
What? No comments. This is just stupid. Let's move on.
Let's move on. Let's move on out of Asia then. I think you want to talk about America next. We're also going to talk about the shooting, George Bush's comments, and of course, then I'll just mention this one. Then you can put comments on this one, Jen. Mexico's president. So there's the America summit coming up soon, and we already talked about this last week with other countries pulling out and threatening to pull out if Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba are not invited. So the U.S. government has said, No invites have been sent out yet. We haven't not invited anyone. We haven't invited anyone. So kind of, diplomatic
This
talk.
is
This is a big development. I mean, the Mexican
right.
president, openly said he's threatening to boycott the summit if they're not invited, which is
Right,
actually
and like here we have the president of Mexico coming out and immediately saying like basically pulling the same move that ASEAN and India did over in Asia, basically saying it's it's the conference of the Americas. So if you are to exclude Americas, and now it's seeming to be like in terms of a population size and
yeah.
like it's seeming to be like a good chunk of like the entireties of the Americas that's not going to freaking show up at the conference at the summit of the Americas.
That would be a huge snub. I mean, to be honest, if Mexico did actually not turn up, then that's a big boycott. That's a really big boycott.
Yeah, so Mexico is not attending. Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba was like
they're not invited.
Yeah, and then you also had Guatemala boycotting.
Yeah.
Wow, like
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
like
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that one.
Be like Colombia or something that shows up, and the United States.
Brazil probably. I don't know if is
Yeah,
Brazil invited. I don't know if that counts as America.
If Brazil doesn't show up, this will be huge. But like the greater point is like on the aspect of economics, like now is the time to stabilize supply chains as much as we humanly possibly can through not trade barriers, not tariffs, not sanctions, not boycotts, but connection, right? So that because there is this scary opinion floating around the internet that says that we basically on the international food market we only have around 10 to 11 more weeks of wheat left.
Yeah.
Well, in that kind of freaking case, if you're not gonna like scramble off your butt, try to find sources of replacement for food, like it can be done. Like we don't all live only exclusively on wheat. There's corn, there's rice, there's all sorts of stuff that you can do. It's not like the end, but like if you keep up this like sanction mentality, this new Cold War mentality, then you're just creating artificial scarcity, and artificial scarcity is gonna be the end of us all. Right. I mean, like the right wingers likes to talk about conspiracy theories. The World Economic Forum just fucking happened. And it's like, yeah, like if you keep up this like artificial scarcity shit, then you might as well prove the right wing 100% correct, like causing an artificial famine worldwide. Like, but imperialism, it's not rational. It's based off of this stupid impulse, right? That is far, far away from the truth of the matter of what actually needs to be done. So here we are, I guess. And we'll see how this develops.
So I guess now we're talking about America. So we should.
Speaking of irrational impulse.
Right. Yeah. But let's go to this shooting story. I think we need to cover this. It's pretty important. I mean, we had 19 children shot in the primary school in Texas. I assume most people have heard of this and know about this. I mean, this comes also. There's a pretty popular video going around right now of this basketball coach, basically addressing this issue, and he's also mentioned the fact that, last week we had Buffalo and Laguna Beach, so African American people in church, in a supermarket, and then Chinese Americans in a church. They were in church. Yeah, 3 big shootings, and then I mean that's not to count all the other ones, but I don't really have much to say about this. For me, the craziness of American shootings, I don't know. For me, I thought that the one in Las Vegas many years ago, I think like 7 years ago, where the guy was in a hotel room and
shooting
he shot,
downwards, right?
yeah, and he shot like 100 people. I mean, he didn't kill 100 people, but he shot 100
Right.
people. Like any scenario where one person can shoot and maybe kill 100 people, surely you would go, okay, there's something fundamentally wrong
Right.
here. We need to change.
It's like
Yeah.
two ironic things. One is about that Las Vegas shooting. For those that believes in gun rights, how do you return fire to that kind of a firing position? Tell me.
Yeah.
You don't. It's called gravity. It's called physics, people.
No, exactly.
Like,
if you've got a guy firing from a hotel, exactly,
you can't reach, whereas they spray down, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Second thing, about these kinds of so the right wing is I don't want to blame it on all right wingers because this is certainly not the case. There are some fairly reasonable right wingers on this case because the Democrats are just completely unreliable because, like you said, Richard, they're not going to do anything to solve any of this crap.
No.
They're just trying to get milk votes out of this shit. That's all they're trying to do.
Right.
But of the unreasonable ones, which is like NRA, National Rifle Association and whatnot, immediately jumping out to say, we are pro-gun, we are pro-gun. And they're even inviting Trump to speak at the event as well. So for such a group that believes in like a good guy with a gun can stop a bad guy with a gun, their conference in Texas in a sports stadium where Trump is going to show up, where all their fans are going to gather, for the sake of safety, nobody is allowed to bring in any firearms.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, also remember, it's going to be a pro-gun and pro-life rally, which is a great, logical combination: pro-life and pro-gun. Yeah, it's a great contradiction. I mean, I've said this before when we've discussed shootings before. I'll mention it for someone who hasn't heard it, perhaps. When I was in the army, I was in the British Army. I was an infantry soldier. You get given an assault rifle, an SA-80, similar weapon to this AR-15, and you get given it. You go on the range, you fire your rounds, you go on an exercise, you go on ops. Sure, if you're on operation, you have it with you all the time, fine. But when you're in barracks, when you're in camp, soldiers don't just have assault rifles with them all the time.
It's locked in a garage.
It's locked in an armory. Yeah. It's dangerous. People have accidents. People get angry. People get drunk. People make mistakes. People do dumb stuff. So even militaries don't allow their soldiers to have access to assault rifles all the time.
Whatever your equivalent of NCO is in your system is needs to memorize the serial numbers of every single gun, like down to every letter, to make sure that the things aren't missing. And everything is counted for.
So on one hand, you have military-grade equipment, when given to the military, is extremely regulated and controlled and put in containers, and like you said, serial numbers, and there's this minute hours and hours of paperwork for how they're regulated and how they're operated. You take the same machinery, give it to the public, in the US particularly, and you have none of the regulation. So it makes no sense to me. I mean, I know that people will bring up this quote, the Marx quote about don't take the guns from the workers, blah, blah, blah. I mean, revolutions are illegal. So I don't know why you
right.
this conversation up anyway. But anyway, that's the shooting. I think we should address the elephant in our room, which is the title of our series, of our episode today. The old man stirs up Asia and eating breads. So I think what we should do though is show what kind of things these dementia-laden brains of the elderly bourgeois get up to. So I'm going to play quickly the Bush clip, Bush's gaffe, if you want to use that term. This is Bush speaking. I think this came out as we finished our stream last week.
Yeah.
Can you hear that there, Jenna? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just cringing.
Let's listen to this. There you go. There you go. Yeah. So I mean that happened last week. We just missed that. I think that we just finished our stream and that came out maybe an hour or something later. But yes, so this is the dementia laden problematic brain of the dying bourgeois.
Yeah.
So now this study on rats. Let's
Oh Lord. So to simplify it for people, like you need a $30 Nature journal subscription to see this damn thing. But so I just sent the Med archive link instead.
Okay.
Some researcher went and for his thesis, I believe it was graduate thesis, practiced and got really good at extracting and injecting cerebral spinal fluids, CSF, of lab rats. Like that stuff is hard enough to do on human or like even livestock like cows, let alone something this small, right? So like the comment from Nature was that, oh, this is a very labor-intensive paper. You should read it. Okay. But for what? Well, you might ask. Well, for tens of thousands of lab rats to for the young ones, their spinal fluid, CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, to be extracted and to be transferred, injected into elderly rats, and has proved that it literally just through the switch of one protein, the FGF17 protein, it increases the cognitive capabilities of elderly rats without any other procedures needed. Just vroom, vroom. Yeah, like easy as that. And so CSF, for people who don't know, is like the fluid that when you sleep, when you go to bed, my pillow. So when you go to bed, CSF goes into your brain and washes away the wastes and toxins that's been built up from mental labor throughout the day, which determines how well you recover and the second day in the short term. And in the long term, determines how much your cognitive function deteriorates due to the buildup of these residual materials in your brain. This is like, so like my friends in China are literally saying like they don't even know how the ethics board of whatever research facility they're at even approved of this shit. Because in China, if you want to do something like this, and as like a, I don't know, like a undergrad biology student, you are literally like you will literally get shut down so hard by every university ethics board ever, and you would probably get sent to therapy. I am not joking. Like this is like from people that's actually like say biology in China. But in the U.S., they y'all don't give a fuck. And as Marxists, we immediately know the economic implications of this.
Right. No, that's it, right? So I mean, we can't say for a fact that this will happen, but if you have a situation where the cerebral, what's it called, the
cerebral spinal fluid, CSF,
cerebral spinal fluid, the CSF of young creatures, young people, young animals, can be taken and put into the brain of an older one, and that then rejuvenates it and helps it, solves all these issues, the memory problems and whatnot. I mean, sure, there might be some positive use for that, so like maybe helping with dementia and stuff. But also, we know we've discussed this before with commodification and with the power of the wealthy to purchase beauty and purchase the elixir of life. Which they'll always throughout history.
Literally, like in China, in the comment sections, they were like literally saying like somebody should wake up Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of China, and said that hey, the elixir of life.
Yeah. Right.
Like, damn, this is like okay. So for people that still don't fully comprehend, extracting cerebral spinal fluid is done with a giant ass needle that is the wall of it is about this thick. Yeah. Okay, like here's my eye, like it's about this thick. To like with some anesthesia, hopefully, but to just be jabbed into your fucking spine, like a sword, like a spike, like a rapier, essentially.
Yeah.
And a huge ass needle. That's how it's done. And well, when you have like this to literally be the elixir of life, to where like the capitalist dog eat man world expression has now turned to be literal.
Yeah.
What you can do is like immediately there will be a fucking black market formed on the shit.
I mean, we
You
talked
bet,
about
like all the like urban legends of like you wake up in an ice cold bathtub with one of your kidney missing.
Yeah.
Like now it's like that, but like way worse.
Yeah.
There will be kidnappings of young people. Like there literally will be looking for like virgin men and women, virgin boys and girls to like kidnap, knock out, extract, and then you're dumped in. I don't know what they'll dump you in.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think that like in the US also you have all these homeless people, right? These people like in the homeless camps of California.
I mean,
You know,
their only hope at that point is to catch AIDS to the
Selling
point where like they're no longer valuable. This is the level of fucked up we're talking about because capitalism.
Yeah. I mean, we already had this conversation, a similar conversation about this a few episodes ago when the guy was pig heart. So in that case, it would have been, you know, flocks of animals of pig organs ready for the old man or woman to get their new heart or liver or whatever. That guy actually did die. The person who did that experiment, he did live for I think a few days, at least maybe more than a week, but he did die in the end. So we have talked about this concept before, the commodification of the essence of life, of the elixir of life,
and
brain fluid and organs.
Like, you know, to go on a bit of a conspiracy theory vibe here, the World Economic Forum, where literally the global finance capital met up, right? In this like super fucking boring meeting that lasted a whole week. They streamed it on their YouTube channel, but there was only like on average like 16 to 20 viewers because it's so boring. But like talking about just a bunch of stupid liberal talking points with some ominous sounding things like you need to enjoy the growing pangs of the Great Reset or something like that. So like comfortable bourgeois and true like global finance bourgeois and puppet politicians from all around the world, right? You can basically make a name list of that and tell you who's reactionary. But like if you look at some of the freaking faces on there, you have what? Henry Kissinger, and like George Soros, like these people that are old, like disgustingly old, right? So like you can clearly see the kind of motivation behind this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, let's just like kidnap some refugee children and then just zap.
Well, I think this is the part that I think that you won't need to kidnap anyone. People are so desperate and so poor, particularly homeless people and desperate people all over the world, that they will willingly sell, probably, if they're forced to, this fluid and other things.
It's like,
I mean, already sell their blood. Like people already go to blood banks and sell blood. And people do.
It's like, good, hey, there's good news and bad news. Good news, your net worth just went up. 2, bad news, it's physical.
Yes. Yeah. You know, your brain has now got a price somewhere. Your brain fluid, I should say. Yeah. Okay. So that's the brain
become
story.
Commodities, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. Beyond just our labor now, our actual physical bodies are becoming things that can be sold and purchased, and creating new sorts of resources, resource rich homeless people. But I don't know what else we want to discuss in terms of America. We've discussed the shooting, George Bush, brain harvesting of brain fluid. Talked about Asia. I think maybe I want to actually drag up some comments just from our viewers who've put out some good stuff. Let me see. Let me try this feature. I've never tried this before. Show this one. Yes. So this is from earlier when we had our NATO discussion. How the fuck did NATO get all the way to the Pacific? Last time I checked, NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We've said this before. I personally think that NATO will not be complete until New Zealand joins, until we're going all the way around back, and the country furthest from NATO has joined. But other comment then from Cancer Box, we've got the biggest polluter is the U.S. Army. I believe that's correct, right? That is fact, right? Yeah, in the world, the U.S. Army is the U.S. military as a whole.
Hey, speaking of that, the U.S. Navy released a report of how which was it, USS Connecticut that got into a huge traffic accident in South China Sea and had the front part of the vessel is a ship smashed in for mysterious reason, right? So they released like a heavily redacted, like a blackout tape over text kind of a report over like how the event happened, right? So like there is two peculiarities in it. One is when the ship, the submarine was about to ram, the captain gave the order to adjust course, but somehow the helmsman didn't do it. That's the first suspicion. The second suspicion is like the only indicator of information before the censored version. None of us can see the uncensored one. I bet you it tells a different story, but the censored version is like how should I say, with like whatever is we are able to read that's not blacked out, is saying that the last thing that the ship detected was a large biological sonar signal that is interpreted to be biological, and then a kaboom smash. So like did they run into Godzilla? Like are we serious? Like
I don't know.
If anyone even wants to make this year even more wild, then the bet is that the United States Navy USS Connecticut ran into fucking Godzilla in South China Sea.
So a large
the more likely answer is that they ran into
whale?
Unmanned submersibles by either China or Russia in the place that's just kind of floating there, emitting no signal and or so little of signal because it can be more compact. It doesn't need to be manned, and like machines are quieter when they're more compact. To where the signal is so faint they interpret it to be a biological thing, like a whale or a dolphin or something.
Right.
That's the more likely answer. But then if they're saying that, then they're basically admitting the superiority of either Chinese or Russian submersible naval tech, which is given the state of how nuclear submarine tech evolved over time is really abnormal. Because the United States excels in two things: one, large shipbuilding and accurate machinery, and two, nuclear power plants and jet engines. These are the two things that American imperialism is actually just the best of the world when it comes to building. But if this is no longer true, then what does it even mean for the strategic balance of the world, really?
Right. Okay, so we have covered all of the main stories we want to talk about. I mean, Ukraine, we're not going to give an update on that one, apart from the fact that Russia is advancing. DPR, LPR forces have taken numbers of small towns across Ukraine, and the advance continues. I think Luhansk will
Zelensky has, for the first time ever, started admitting defeat. This is the first time that he verbally admitted on record any kind of defeat whatsoever at all. Which,
right.
That's big, kind of.
Yeah. I think that for this week it was pretty, from the Western perspective, lots, not a very from the narrative. There wasn't any sort of big good story for them. I know there was a trial of a Russian soldier, in the Ukraine court, but apart from this, the advance in the east is, the Russians are making ground, and so there was not much spin in terms of trying to find some sort of story to paint it differently. But we'll be back with that next week. We'll be back to discuss what's happened in Ukraine so far.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe like just like last week, maybe after like right after this stream,
something happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's all we have time for today. So thank you for watching, whoever's been watching, and this will be on the podcast later. We're going to start making some Patreon episodes that you have to pay for because we need money. So thank you for watching. What have we got? We've got some comments. Okay, we'll have to cover these next week. Some Ukrainian ship mines. Ukrainian ship mines. Yes, maybe.
Yes.
But yes, thank you for watching, guys, and we will catch you next week.
All.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.